You're a startup founder. Finding product market fit is probably your number one priority. But to land bigger customers, you also need security compliance. Obtaining your SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certification can open those big doors, but they take time and energy, pulling you away from building and shipping. That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta is the all-in-one compliance solution helping startups get audit ready and build a strong security foundation quickly and painlessly. Vanta automates the manual security tasks that slow you down, helping you streamline your audit. The platform connects you with trusted experts to build your program, auditors to get you through audits quickly, and a marketplace for essentials like pen testing. So whether you're closing your first deal or gearing up for growth, Vanta makes compliance easy. Join over 8,000 companies, including Y Combinator and Techstar startups who trust Vanta. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/simplify. That's VANTA.com/simplify for $1,000 off.
O'Reilly! You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome into a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Hunt out today. Taylor Sharp sitting in the host chair for our guy. He will be back tomorrow. But for the next 2 hours, you got me, along with Jacob Beck, along with Cassie Spazzali. Guys, how we doing on this Thursday?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Is it nice to have a break from Hunt or no? You can be honest.
I mean, we could use a break every once in a while.
Cool.
Yeah, this was good.
All right. That's all I needed to know. Whenever you ask that question, you know, you're taking a little bit of a risk and be like, no, dude,
you're not
get the
really.
heck out of here. Okay.
No, you're not. Don't worry.
Want to start today. We're going to get into LSU football, but something that broke about an hour ago. Ian Rappaport was the first to have it. Look, it's not really breaking news. It is because it just happened, but this has been widely expected. The New Orleans Saints are hiring Doug Nussmeier as the team's offensive coordinator. Ian Rappaport had it. All your New Orleans reporters are tweeting it out as well. This is to be expected. Doug Nussmeier, look, obviously he has had a ton of success at the college level as an offensive coordinator. Us here in Baton Rouge, we remember him at Alabama. He was there in 2012 and 2013. He followed Jim McElwain after McElwain left to take a head coaching job. Doug Nussmeier came in, won a national championship with Alabama in 2012. He got to coach under Nick Saban, which never hurts anything. He's never been a coordinator in the NFL. But again, look, he goes to Alabama, Michigan, Florida, Washington. He's been an offensive coordinator on the college level at some big-time places. This makes a ton of sense, though. When you look at Kellen Moore's path to becoming the Saints head coach, it's a very similar path for Doug Nussmeier becoming the Saints offensive coordinator. Nussmeier left Florida as the offensive coordinator in 2017. In 18 to 19, he was with the Dallas Cowboys as a tight ends coach. Then he got bumped up to QB coach. He was there for 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022. He was there with Kellen Moore while Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator. They did some staff shakeups in Dallas. Kellen Moore takes the offensive coordinator job at LA. Who is his quarterback's coach? It is one Doug Nussmeier in 2023. This past season, what does Kellen Moore do? He leaves the Chargers. He goes to be the offensive coordinator of the Eagles. Who is his quarterback's coach? If you guess Doug Nussmeier, then that's 1 point for you. And now he is going to be the offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints. Again, he's never been a coordinator at the NFL level, but I mean, let's be honest. Kellen Moore is going to call plays for this New Orleans Saints team. But Kellen Moore is a first-time head coach. It is good to get familiarity and comfortability in that building with you because you're in a new role, right? You need guys that have been with you, that you can trust, that you can lean on. Doug Nussmeier is a longtime coach at a number of different places. He's been there, done that. This makes a lot of sense to me. We're not going to dive too deep in on it because, again, guys, This is something that had been expected for quite some time. Luke Johnson, he's going to join us next segment to kind of talk about that a little bit more. So we're going to get into that with him. Right now, what I want to do is kind of shift to LSU football. Spring practice is coming up pretty soon. We all know about the big-time game coming up between LSU and Clemson. We're going to get there. Before we do, though, let's get this thing started like we do every day.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
So ESPN.com asked some of its writers to pick a season-defining game for every preseason top 25 team. Most of them were rivalry games. Like, okay, Ohio State's is Michigan. Michigan's is Ohio State. Shocker. We'll throw that out right now. Oregon and Penn State, Oregon and Ohio State, all those games are tied in together just like they were this past season. Chris Lowe was the writer to choose LSU's season-defining game. And he wasted no time because he chose the opener against the Clemson Tigers. This makes a lot of sense. This very well could be LSU's season-defining game. They've struggled in season openers. Haven't won a season opener since 2019. We talk about it all the time, right? And as great as the 2019 team was, they opened with Georgia Southern. Now you're in prime time. Most of these games are Sunday night, and you are opening with top 10 teams every single year. I love playing Clemson. I do kind of wish it was week 2 because you've struggled so much against these top tier teams in the opening week. Okay, look, 2019 LSU. Everybody considers it the greatest college football team of all time. I am definitely not here to tell you any different. I think that is 100% true. But if you remember, they were in a battle with Texas in Austin. A 5-point game. That was week 2. Who's to say that if LSU doesn't play that game in week 1, they lose? Now, I think they still win that game, but the point is, the last time you did this, you played an easier opponent in week 1. Then you played that marquee out-of-conference matchup week 2. I wish LSU would go back to that. It's not going to happen, though. But there are a number of reasons that this particular game worries me. Reason number 1, you're on the road in a hostile environment. It's also a little bit different from the home games or the season openers that LSU's played in the past. They haven't really played a true road game. So 2020, you were actually at home against Mississippi State. You lose that game. UCLA, road game. You're in the Rose Bowl. You play UCLA. You lose that one. Then you got Florida State, neutral sites back-to-back. You got them in the Superdome. You got them in Camping World Stadium. You lose both of those. You haven't really played a true road game outside of UCLA, but Clemson is an entirely different beast. You are going into a hostile environment. I mean, that is a really tough place to play. Look, I get it. We are the real Death Valley. We like to call Clemson Little Death Valley. It's hard to win there, though. Whatever you think about their nickname, who had it first, doesn't matter. It is hard to win there. Okay, Beck, since 2014, so the past 10 years of college football, Dabo Swinney has had 75 home games at Clemson. In 75 home games, what is his win-loss record in 75 home games in the last 10 years?
I'll say 55-20.
Dabo Swinney is 70-5 in 75 home games over the last 10 years.
Not close.
No, just put that out there. But the reason you're not close, Beck, is because that's absurd. And actually, 2 of those losses were last year. So from 2014 to 2023, he had 3 losses at home. That is ridiculous. So you're going into a place, a hostile environment with a coach that has been there for a while. He has his culture the way he wants to, and he is almost unbeatable at home over the last 10 years. And you struggle really bad in opening games. Also, the amount of returning production for Clemson on offense. Clemson returns Antonio Williams, TJ Moore, and Bryant Wesco. Those 3 guys were Clemson's 3 leading receivers last season. They are all back. Obviously, you have Cade Klubnik back. You look at the Heisman pecking order, Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning, Cade Klubnik. That's pretty much the list right there. It's going to be a premier quarterback battle. Now, I like my guy. We'll get to him in a minute, but Cade Klubnik, 37 total touchdowns a year ago, and what happened? He brought down the turnover numbers. That was a big thing on him 2 years ago as his starting quarterback, not unlike what Garrett Nussmeier did last year. People said, hey, we love your aggressiveness. We love what we've seen from you. We know the talent's there. Can you limit the turnovers? He had single-digit turnovers last season. And they played in extra games because they got into the college football playoff. Also, I just mentioned it. It might actually be, as much as you've struggled these last 5 years, this might actually be the best team you've played in the season opener, at least on paper going into the matchup. Florida State wound up being really good. The second go round in Florida State, 2023 version. But going into it, you were like, hey, I like this matchup. There's a lot of things you can find positive for LSU. And then last year you lose to USC, who went 6-6. They were nothing to write home about. Florida State, the first time, they were okay. Mississippi State collapsed after KJ Costello set the SEC passing record on you. He was benched 2 weeks later. And then UCLA, they were a middle-of-the-road team. So it's one thing to struggle in season openers. You're also struggling against, outside of 1 year against Florida State, pretty average teams. Clemson is a preseason top 10 team no matter where you look. So for those reasons, this is a game that worries me. I could see this being a season-defining game. There are some reasons for optimism, though. Number one, this might be LSU's best team under Brian Kelly. And since the 2019 team where you started this skit, you have a returning quarterback who finished the season as hot as anybody in college football, who is squarely in the Heisman conversation heading into next season. You return both your offensive and defensive coordinators. That's huge. You can't say that for a lot of teams. Clemson themselves breaking in a new defensive coordinator. He was excellent where he was a year ago, but he still was not in that building. Joe Sloan's only going to get more and more familiar as the play caller here at LSU. Him and Garrett Nussmeier's relationship is only going to get stronger. With Blake Baker, you already saw the jump he made from year 1 to year 2 at Missouri. They were an awful defense. They were ranked like 120th in the country. Blake Baker gets there. They're in the 50s. The next season, they're a top 25 defense. I don't see why you can't make the same jump here at LSU. LSU's defense was horrendous the last year under Matt House. They hovered around, about the 50 mark, about where they were his first year at Missouri. Why can't he make that big jump this year? You should also be much improved in the secondary. That's important in the matchup against Clemson because they were 18th in total offense last year. I talked about the 37 touchdowns for Cade Klubnik. You return your 3 leading receivers. They really couldn't run the ball last year. They weren't very good at it. And their lead running back from a year ago, Phil Maffa, he's also not on the team anymore. So you're breaking in a new running back on a team that wasn't able to run the football. So LSU matches up well with them. But again, the struggles that we have seen from LSU in the opening games, playing, in my opinion, the best team on paper you have played since this 5-year skid, it is a coin flip game. It is the definition of a coin flip game. And I think Chris Lowe nailed it. I think he was absolutely right to include this the season-defining game. Because think about it last year. There was so much hype coming into last season. Sure, you replaced Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels. Everyone was so excited to see Garrett Nussmeier. You hired Blake Baker. You knew your defense was going to be improved. So much build-up to the first game of the year, only for everything to kind of collapse after game 1. And everyone's kind of looking around, fans, players, coaches saying, okay, where do we go from here? When you lose the first game of the season, because Clemson is not a conference game, obviously. LSU could lose to Clemson week 1. They could go run the table in the SEC, win the SEC championship. They're going to be a top 4 seed in the college football playoff, no question about it. But losing the first game of the season allows you such a little margin of error that it almost is a must-win game. And it's going to set the tone for you for the rest of the season. If you can get that big win week 1, you get the monkey off your back, you finally perform well in the opener, you're in that win column, you have a top 10 win early in the season, that's really going to kickstart everything for you down the road. You don't have to play from behind. You're behind the 8 ball every year these last 4 or 5 years because you start the season 0-1. If you can get that win in week 1 in that opener, it's huge. I agree. I think that is the season-defining game. For what it's worth, ESPN did not put Clemson's season-defining game as the LSU Tigers. They did at Louisville on November 14th, and they said, look, it's tempting to suggest the opener against LSU will tell the story of the 2025 season for Clemson, but look no further than last season. Because remember, that was the game in Ireland. It was 6-0 at halftime. Clemson looked like they were right in it. Georgia came out in the second half and blew the doors off the Clemson Tigers. It was 34-3. People were calling for Dabo's job, saying, hey, the game's passed him by. He won't adapt. He doesn't like the transfer portal. It's time to wrap this up. Yeah, they made the college football playoff last season. it's going to be Louisville because that was the game that almost derailed their season a year ago. I mentioned Dabo Swinney 70-5 at home since 2014. Louisville got him at Memorial Stadium last year. And so did South Carolina at the end of the year. That's why Clemson was able to scoot in without winning the ACC championship. So while it might be the season-defining game for LSU, they don't believe it is for Clemson. I actually agree, though. I know you have tough games. I know you have to go on the road to Ole Miss. I know you have to go to Alabama. I know there are tough games on this schedule. You got to win the opener. We say it every single year, and we're going to keep repeating it. Me, everybody else on this station, until you get it done. I agree. I think the season-defining game is that opener for the LSU Tigers against Clemson on the road. All right, look, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, we're going to take a deeper dive into this Doug Nussmeier hiring. Luke Johnson's going to hop on with us in his normal spot. We'll talk that. We'll talk Taysom Hill trade value. That's a hot topic right now. The future of Derek Carr in New Orleans. All that coming up on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show. 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets, onebathandclosets.com. David Duvall and his team, 30 years, redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. There are a lot of people who are not over the moon with their current home. Well, you can improve where you live. One Bath and Closets is happy to help you do that. Brand new customized closet, brand new bathroom, soup to nuts. They do the entire thing for you. You don't have to call 3 different contractors to get this entire thing done. No, you make one call to One Bath and Closets. They handle the entirety of it. Maybe you're not looking for something that extensive. Maybe you're looking for something like a tub to shower conversion. They can do that as well. You don't reuse that tub. They can take it out, put a glass walk-in shower in, changes the look of your bathroom, changes the functionality of your bathroom, adds value to your home. So if down the road you're looking to move on, that's an asset that you've got right there under your roof. We're worried about paying for it. Financing options are very much available for the folks over at One Bath and Closets. It starts with a free consultation, a questionnaire, and then a plan. They get it done and they do it right the first time and leave the competition behind. It's One Bath and Closets. You can check them out online at onebathandclosets.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
All right, welcome back into a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp filling in for Hunt Palmer, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets here on this Thursday. Hunt does it every Thursday about this time. We want to welcome in Luke Johnson from The Advocate. Luke, how are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, a couple hours ago, it was unofficially announced. So we got a little bit to talk about. Looks like the Saints are going to hire Doug Nussmeier as the offensive coordinator. You know, this is something that everyone kind of expected for a while now. You know, I mean, his ties to Kellen Moore, he's been with him multiple stops now. But what are kind of your overall thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. And really, when you think about it, like the Kellen Moore staff that we know so far, they're all young guys. Nussmeier is going to be the first one who's in his 50s on the staff. So I think having a guy with a lot of experience, even though like not a lot of NFL coaching experience, he's just been around the game for a long time, will help. And you know, especially when you're talking about building out the offense and putting together game plans. Like, this is somebody who's been with Kellen Moore since 2019. Like, he knows what he wants. He knows how he wants to get the message across. And he comes with a lot of experience. And obviously there's the Louisiana ties with Garrett being at LSU and, you know, his wife being a Louisiana native. You know, they've remained tied here. The family has for a long time. And I'm sure it'll be nice for him to be closer to Baton Rouge and maybe get a chance to see Garrett play on Saturdays a couple times.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Luke. I kind of brought that up in the opener last segment about, yes, Doug Nussmeier has been a coordinator at a ton of different places in college. He's had a lot of success. Hadn't done it in the NFL coordinator-wise, but this has to be more of like a comfortability factor for Kellen, right? Because he's a first-time head coach, and he's going to be the primary play caller, I would imagine.
Yeah, Kellen already said he's going to be the primary play caller. So, you know, I think that's exactly what this is, and that's really why this was kind of telegraphed from the beginning. Look, he's been with him from Dallas to Los Angeles to Philly and now here. And, you know, I think when you're looking at an offensive-minded head coach needing to fill an offensive coordinator position, oftentimes you're not going to get like the young rising coach to be in that spot because they're not going to be calling plays. For Doug Nussmeier, who's he's in his 50s, he hasn't had the coordinator job in the NFL to this point. Like, it makes a lot of sense for him to be in that spot. Just because it kind of limits your pool of candidates when they're not going to be the guys calling plays, and it's going to that would be kind of limiting on their ability to use this as like a jumping off point for the NFL or for a head coaching job. Sorry.
Well, look, I mean, yes, 100%. And now that the staff is kind of figured out for the most part, at least on the offensive side of the ball, there's some offensive players that have been rumored for a lot of different places. I mean, obviously the Saints have to get under the salary cap, which just changed. We'll get into that in a minute. But, there's been a lot of talk about the Saints possibly moving on from Taysom Hill, whether it's trying to find a trade partner for him, whether it's ultimately just cutting him and moving on. If they do try to trade him, what do you think his trade value is at this point in his career?
Yeah, I mean, minimal.
Yeah.
He's 35 years old. He's coming off a major season-ending injury. Even knowing Taysom Hill and knowing how I'm sure he's attacking his rehab very hard right now, and is probably clearing the benchmarks for his return and returning early. That's still that's a big question mark hanging over his head. If you're talking about a trade value, I mean, at best, a late round draft pick.
I guess the thing,
even if it's like Sean Payton, right?
Of course,
you're going to get out of him.
They're being tied to the Broncos, obviously, because Payton wants to just reinvent everything he did here over there. But I guess the thing is, like, okay, if the trade value's like you say it is, which I believe it is as well, would they be better off just keeping him? Because look, they're getting that boost in salary cap. We don't know quite the number yet. We know the general range. And then you're not going to be much different as far as the cap hit, whether keeping him or cutting him. Would they just be better off keeping him if they can't trade him?
100%. I'm having a hard time seeing. Like, I've seen this rumor floating around that they're moving on, which who knows where the hell that stuff starts. But it makes almost no sense to get rid of him. Because he's gonna cost you whatever the cap hit is this year, $17 million. Regardless, I think they get like $270,000 in cap relief by releasing him. It doesn't really make much sense to do it as a post June 1st move either. And they're gonna probably have to use one of those spots on Ryan Ramczyk. They only get 2 post June 1st cuts. There's just a lot of reasons why it doesn't really make sense. Like the only reason you're going to be moving on from Taysom or even some of these other guys, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, same sort of situation where it's either going to cost you more money to release them, or you're going to have like a very negligible difference in your cap.
Speaking of
the only reason you'd release those guys is if you just want to replace them with somebody younger. That's it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of aging players, you just mentioned Cam Jordan. That's kind of where I wanted to go next. Like, is there any possibility of the Saints, try to trade Cam Jordan? Because he's a guy that, while he's older, he's still been a pretty productive player for the most part over the last 2 years. Like, is that a possibility?
I mean, maybe. But again, it's you're talking about somebody who's in his mid 30s who hasn't produced for a couple years. Who's going to cost a lot of money. I'm having a hard time seeing a scenario where a team is willing to take on the salary and the cost associated with a player who's clearly in decline. That to me is, if he's going to be playing elsewhere, it's going to be as a free agent after the Saints release him, which that again is just made more difficult because of all the way they've kicked the can down the road with the cap. It's going to cost them more to release him than it would to have him on the team.
Speaking of the potential to move on from high-profile players on this team, I was of the assumption that they were just going to roll with Derek Carr year one of Kellen Moore. And, obviously that's still a possibility. But, I mean, you've heard the quotes, right? When Kellen Moore was asked in the press conference, hey, is he your quarterback? All he said was, I think Derek Carr is a good quarterback in this league. And the rumors started flying. Oh, well, Kellen Moore hasn't committed to Derek Carr. What are you kind of hearing? What do you kind of feel? Like, what is the future of Derek Carr in New Orleans?
I think it's very much up in the air. All right, and you hear those answers from Kellen Moore, and you're like, well, okay, would he say the same thing if he's being introduced in Jacksonville and they were asking him about Trevor Lawrence? Probably not, right? So I think that just tells me that they're going to explore every possibility. And it may very well lead to them bring Derek Carr back, restructuring his contract. It's the easiest way for them to clear up some of their cap overages this year. But like you could also talk yourself into, and I think I have myself, where you can be like, hey, this guy's not our long-term answer at quarterback. We may not have it on the roster this year, but if we go out there and we release Derek Carr and we eat the big $50 million cap hit this year, it makes it a lot easier on us next year, and we'll see what Spencer Rattler can do, or they go out and sign Justin Fields to something that like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed Baker Mayfield to a few years ago. You see what some young quarterback can do, and if he's great. And if he's no good, then you've got a really good chance of picking a quarterback, the top 5 pick in 2026, and resetting everything there. But like if he's not your guy, and he's not going to be your guy, and you don't really have the guy behind him that you're fully confident in, like what's the point in keeping him around?
Do you think maybe that's the best play? Because like you mentioned, you cut him, you take the big cap hit 1 year, but then you're completely off the hook. And like, Luke, I don't want to be doom and gloom over here. The Saints don't really have the roster to make a Super Bowl run right now. So like, would it matter? I mean, would the best play in your opinion just be to cut ties with it right now?
I mean, I think for me, that is the best play.
Yeah.
But like I could be talked into keeping him, right? Like I think he's clearly the best quarterback on the roster, and people who want to debate that, I think they're just really they're speaking emotionally and not looking at the facts. But is he worth the $40 million that you're paying him? Probably not, right? Especially considering the other problems with the roster. So I think to me. If you are able to get yourself in a more healthy cap situation in 2026, if you're able to see what Spencer Rattler can do, maybe he's really good, maybe he's not. I think either way, the answer is okay, because it's a good quarterback class in 2026, or at least it looks like one right now. And if Rattler's good, and you got a quarterback under a cheap rookie contract for 2 more years.
Luke, before I get you out of here, look, all this talk has been, okay, well, this guy's aging. You're not deep here. You got to move on from this guy. I understand that this is not a great Saints roster right now, but if you had to pick one position where you're like, hey, they're the deepest, or maybe not the deepest, but like they have solid young talent that you got to hold on to, if any, what position would that be?
I mean, wide receiver, I think they've got 2 really good ones. 2 like game-changing type of players. I still think you need to add to that group. I really like Ted McMillan out of Arizona. Yeah. I think he would be a perfect complement to what they have in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. But I really like the youth and explosiveness at that position, and guys that are still both for the moment very cheap. And I'm actually like feel kind of okay about where they're at on the offensive line. Weirdly enough, as much as that was like everybody was hand-wringing about that going into last year, I think they're 2 pieces away there, right? Like a starting caliber left guard or tackle where they can move Penning inside, and a quality depth piece. But like I think they have a chance to be really good for a while, because everybody there is 27 and under. It could be really good if you get the right coaches in.
All right, well, Luke, we'll see what they do with the draft. The draft about 2 months away at this point. Luke, I know Hunt's not in. We had to kind of roll with the punches. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Yeah, no problem. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, that was Luke Johnson right there with The Advocate. We're going to take a quick timeout. On the other side of this break, we're going to shift from football to baseball. We've talked a lot of football these last few segments. LSU's got another weekend series coming up. We're going to talk to Joe Healy of D1 Baseball. SEC, LSU, we're going to hit it all. That's coming up on the other side here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. They're the only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana, and they're right here in Baton Rouge. I told y'all earlier this week we were driving, my wife goes, "Oh, that's that car I really like. It's a Genesis." And she had no idea that I even do this. I was like, yeah, they're really nice. They're really, really nice. And you should know it too. You don't see a ton of Genesis on the road because it's fairly new to our city here. They've only been at that location for a year and a half, but go check it out. It's a luxury vehicle. It's a luxury experience to be a Genesis driver. That means 3 years of complimentary maintenance, a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. It's a luxury experience at a reasonable price over at Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every single car that's on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. And all of them, every single model, from the entry level to the highest end, come with the same safety features. Safety is a priority for Genesis. Go check them out. Genesis of Baton Rouge. They're online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. That's Genesis of Baton Rouge.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
My body started shaking and I can't take no more.
Welcome back into a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. We have talked a lot of football, which when Hunt's hosting, it's probably a little bit of a rarity this time of year. We're going to talk baseball, not quite as much as our guy Hunt Palmer, but right now I believe we have Joe Healy of D1 Baseball hopping on with us right now. Joe, how are you today?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Doing excellent. Joe, look, I was looking at D1 Baseball last night, and you guys' latest top 25, 9 SEC teams in the top 25, 4 of the top 5 teams in the country. So I guess at least at this point in the season, is this the best baseball conference in America?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been that way for maybe the last 3 to 4 years, maybe a little bit longer than that by just about every metric. It's not just teams in the rankings. It's also, it's been SEC national champions. They're on a streak of that now. You look at the number of players drafted. You look at the number of big leaguers. You look at every measure, and yeah, SEC is a cut above. Now, I will say the ACC, is the second best conference, and I'm not necessarily saying it's catching up to the SEC, but it has improved itself, and we saw it last year with there being 4 ACC teams in addition to 4 SEC teams in Omaha. So I do think there are other programs that have seen some of the stuff the SEC is doing in terms of, elevating their baseball programs and have decided, hey, we can do that too, and are starting to maybe close the gap ever so slightly. But yeah, it's still SEC on top and then everybody else.
You're talking about the SEC being kind of a step above everybody else. And, okay, LSU looked dominant this weekend, who we'll, of course, get to. And then, all these teams had good weekends. But every poll I look at, whether it's you guys at D1 Baseball, whether it's anybody, seems to have Texas A&M at the top of their rankings. What is it about the Aggies coming into this year that has everybody so excited?
It's just a really complete roster. I mean, you can look at anybody else we have in the top 5, top 10, and you can nitpick something along the way, right? Like LSU's leaning on some young players, right, that we're not quite sure what to expect from them. You can say a lot of the same things about Tennessee, but Texas A&M is the one team where you can look around and you're not really sure where they're weak, right? They have maybe the best player in the country in Jay Slaviolette. They have a lineup that returned a whole bunch from a team that was one game away from winning a national title last season. They got an ace back in Ryan Prager, who in pretty much any other year in college baseball history probably signs as an early round draft pick, but I'm presuming some NIL money got involved there, got him back to Texas A&M, and so he's as accomplished an ace as there is in college baseball, and their bullpen is full of guys who are prospects and throw really hard and have good stuff. And so, look, anything can happen. It's college baseball, but right now that is the one complete roster in the country, and that's Texas A&M.
There's obviously, I mentioned it, like 4 of the top 5 teams in y'all's rankings are SEC teams. There's 9 in the top 25 we just talked about. Is there an SEC team, at least coming into the year, that you think, hey, that team may be a little bit under the radar? I could see them surprising some people.
Yeah, I think it's Auburn. In part because that coaching staff has done such a good job with that program that I just have a hard time imagining 2 straight years where that team is underwhelming in the way they were last year. And they had some bad injury luck last year, too. That was part of it. But, they've got high-end players. Ike Irish is one of the best catchers in the country. Cooper McMurray at first base is one of the best veteran power bats in the country. And they brought in a freshman class of pitchers. I like LSU's overall class better, but if you just separate out the pitchers, Auburn's class is right there with what LSU brought in on the mound in their freshman class. So they've obviously, it's a tough road in the SEC. Everyone has a tough road in the SEC, and there are going to be more talented teams than Auburn, but that program's been so consistent under Butch Thompson and his staff that I have to imagine a bounce back is coming.
Joe Healy of D1 Baseball joining us right now. Joe, want to narrow our focus from the SEC to LSU, of course, our team here in Baton Rouge. Look, folks around here, as you can imagine, incredibly excited about this baseball team. They have walked 3 batters in their first 4 games total with everybody combined. As far as LSU goes, what kind of squad do you think Jay Johnson has this year?
Really strong. I mean, that's no surprise. Really talented. We're just going to have to wait a little while to really know beyond that exactly what we have. We ranked them in the top 5 for a reason. We believe in that talent. Some of it is unproven. Some of it is really young. But we just really believe in the talent. But again, like this weekend series against Omaha is probably not going to tell us much more than we learned last weekend against Purdue-Fort Wayne. They have a tournament coming up in Frisco the weekend after that, and the competition gets a little bit stiffer there. So I think that's when we really start to learn some things about this team. But look, understanding the competition level was what it was last weekend, there were a lot of things to like. You mentioned the strike throwing. That's a bare minimum against a team like that. That lineup at Purdue-Fort Wayne and Omaha this weekend, that lineup can't really hurt you. So just throw strikes, just pound the zone and work through it. And I like that they got the freshmen in. Some of the freshmen shined, Kiriel at the plate, but on the mound, William Schmidt got some time. They were able to get freshmen in there and put them in positions to succeed right away. So as far as, being able to learn something from those series, I'm not so sure about that so much as it's just like, hey, you dominated, you threw a bunch of strikes, you scored a bunch of runs, everybody looked good, nobody seemed to suffer a season-ending injury, and that's really all you can ask for out of a series like that.
What do you think? I mean, obviously the pitching's been great, but you mentioned, not the best lineups. You're kind of just working everything out right now. Maybe like strength of the team, or like if I told you, hey, LSU made an Omaha run this year, what was the key to that? Like strength of this team, what do you think it is?
I think it's just the pitching depth ends up being right up there with a team like Texas A&M or Arkansas in terms of being, the elite of the elite. Because it's look, if the freshmen are proved that, hey, we're ready to go, like right now, if some of the veterans who maybe were either have been injured or for whatever reason weren't a part of it, like Chase Shores, obviously look really strong in his start. If he's fully healthy and back to being the guy they thought he could be, Cade Woods, an Alabama transfer who didn't pitch much last year, who has really good stuff, if he's a big part of it this year. So it's for me, I think there are a number of answers to this question, but the one that stands out most to me is just if the pitching depth ends up being totally undeniable in the end.
Look, we talked about it. Purdue-Fort Wayne, your midweek's not ever going to tell you much, really, if anything at all. You have Omaha this weekend, but coming up, LSU's going to actually take a trip out to Dallas Baptist. They're going to play those guys who's a top 25 team. What do you want to see from the Tigers against DBU?
Yeah, for there, it's going to be I want to see the offense against some of the power arms that DBU has, because DBU is one of the mid-major programs around the country that is going to have power conference pitching stuff. Sometimes they don't have all of the pitchability or the specific roles locked down, but in terms of stuff, they're going to have plenty of it, and they're a program that really gets up for their games against powerhouse teams like LSU. So you're going to get a punch in the mouth from them, and it's just a matter of, for LSU, can you absorb that punch and can you swing back and land your own haymaker? So I think that's going to be a big one for just what does LSU do when they're in a game where, hey, these guys are pretty talented too, and if we don't play well, we could lose this game. I mean, the first 2 weekends, they can make all kinds of mistakes. Now, they haven't, but they could make all kinds of mistakes and still win those series. It'll be a little bit different when they take on DBU and then they play in that tournament in Frisco. Those are games where we're going to really learn, okay, when your back is a little bit against the wall or when you've got a team there that can match you a little bit at certain positions, what are you going to be able to do? So I want to see the bats against the DBU arms, but I also just want to see how does LSU deal with a team that can beat them versus the ones they've seen so far, which is like you have kind of to squint to figure out any sort of way in which LSU loses those games.
Joe, before I get you out of here, look, we saw all the top teams this weekend. So many teams look dominant, but give me A week one overreaction. It can be positive or negative. Does not have to be SEC, just week one overreaction.
Virginia's offense maybe not as good as we thought it was going to be. They had just that's their bread and butter. Last year was an excellent lineup, but it felt like maybe they had a couple guys in their lineup last year that overperformed what expectations are, and maybe some of those guys are coming back down to earth. Now, it's an overreaction for a reason. I don't know if I totally believe that, but they didn't swing the bats well last weekend as the number 2 team in the country in the tournament they played in Puerto Rico. And I expected a lot more from their offense, and their pitching is probably the weaker part of their game, but it was actually what lifted them up last weekend. I don't think that's sustainable for them. I don't think they're going to continue to be the number 2 team in the country if they don't swing the bats a lot better than they did last weekend.
Joe Healy of D1 Baseball. Joe, thanks for hopping on with us today.
Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Yep, absolutely. That was Joe Healy right there of D1 Baseball. Interestingly enough, I mentioned that there were 4 of the top 5 teams in college baseball from the SEC. He gave me a week one overreaction that Virginia may be slipping out of there soon. That's the only SEC team that is not in the top 5. We can get us an all SEC top 5. That would really tell us something. Look, we know what SEC is in football. Obviously, we've seen them in basketball. I mean, as good as they are at baseball right now, this is the best the SEC has maybe ever been, at least in my lifetime, in basketball as far as top to bottom goes. You're going to be dominant in football, in basketball, and in baseball. Best conferences in the country. That is just really impressive for the SEC as a whole. All right, we're going to take a quick timeout. When we get back, we're going to continue our discussion of LSU baseball. No game from last night to recap, but we'll still talk about maybe give you my thoughts on that game cancellation and maybe some hockey coming to the city of New Orleans. We'll talk about that on the way back here on the Hunt Palmer Show, 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, AVSSLA.com is the website. Mitchell Fisher and his local team are fantastic to work with, and they do a number of things. I talk to you about security systems all the time. They handled ours. If you're looking to get a security system at your business or at your home that's complete with all the cameras, the apps, everything that's got you set up at the top of a button, they can do that for you. They can also help you out with your outdoor entertainment space. If this is the time of year where you love to get out back when it's a little bit cooler, light the fire, listen to some tunes, or watch TV in the outdoor area, Mitchell Fisher and his team at Audio Video Security Solutions can help you out with all of that. They can supply the television. They can supply all of the equipment. Their install at the Palmer House was just painless and easy, and the customer service afterward has been great. They can do simple things like I talked about mounting the television. They can also do complex things as well. So give them a call or just check them out online, avssla.com. It's Audio Video Security Solutions.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Welcome back into a Thursday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show. Taylor Sharp here with you. Great bump music last segment, Beck. Little Whitesnake. I don't know who picked that one.
Yeah, that was you. You picked it.
Cassie picked this one for anyone wondering.
No, she didn't.
Well, it's indirectly her fault because she would not make a decision, so we had to go with the generic bum music. We'll get it. She'll redeem herself. We got a whole other hour to go, guys.
She had selected one, but
I picked one, but you said that it was.
We deemed it overplayed. Yeah, we deemed it a little bit overplayed.
So I got to think of something more unique.
Just a little. Just a tad. She wanted to play "Living on a Prayer" by Journey. Okay.
Full disclosure.
I mean, by
Not Journey.
By Bon Jovi.
Journey.
Whatever. Bon Jovi. Love that song. It's just need a little bit more. Just a little bit more from you, Cassie.
All right.
Look, this is your warm-up hour. Okay. Consider it. Look,
Put me on the spot. I have a break to think of something else.
Yeah, you're right. You do. I was hoping that we were going to have an LSU baseball recap segment today. It's really what I wanted to lead the show with. But Beck, were you cold coming into work today?
Yes.
Did you come in?
Yes.
Cassie, were you cold coming into work today?
Oh, I was freezing.
Did you skip any of your classes because you're cold?
I was so close to skipping my class, but I felt like it was pointless because I had to come here anyway. So I was like, might as well just go to class.
Well, if you were close to skipping, then you were almost a member of the LSU baseball team. Obviously, guys, I'm being a little tongue in cheek, but they canceled the game yesterday that was supposed to be out in Thibodeau against the Nichols Colonels for what they called extreme cold. Now, you can laugh about that a little bit. Look, I get it. It's early in the season. What are you actually going to learn from playing a game against Nichols? They've actually are going to reschedule that. They're hoping to play that this coming Monday, actually, after the weekend series. So they're going to play 2 midweek games this weekend, which is what they're supposed to do this week. I normally don't care about midweek cancellations. The reason I care a little bit more about this one is simply because you lose innings. Now, I know what you're thinking. Whatever, it's Nichols. I totally get that. Still haven't seen Gavin Guidry this year. You're going to see Gavin Guidry. Look, he's been on the team for 3 years now. I get it. Also, I really want to see Blaze Priester behind the plate starting a game. He's played in every game so far. He has not started a game yet. Nichols would have been the perfect time to get him in there because, look, I still think your catcher position is still very much up in the air. You brought in Luis Hernandez. He's been good behind the plate defensively. He hadn't really hit much. I think Cade Arambidi probably has the highest ceiling of any of these guys on your team. He hadn't hit. His defense hadn't been good enough so far to make up for that. And then Priester, he's been inconsistent as well. I think the catcher position is still very much up for grabs. Again, I think Hernandez, obviously your most experienced guy. Arambidi may have the highest floor, but I really wanted to see Priester get a start behind the plate, even if it is against somebody like Nichols, just to see how he handles a full game of work. But look, they're going to be fine. You'll likely see a run rule this weekend against Omaha. So again, you're limiting some of the innings for maybe Guidry because you obviously want to get all the solid arms you saw last weekend back in the weekend rotation again this weekend against Omaha. So a little bit they're going to have to work through there, but they're going to be fine. It's Nichols. They're making up the game next Monday. Did want to have a little bit of fun, though, because you see it say, we canceled this game for extreme cold. Yeah, no, I get it. But look, it's Louisiana. We don't handle cold very well. We were out of this station for 2 days due to snow. Now, granted, we could not have made it into work, but you get the idea. Guys, quick answer from both of you. We only have about a minute left. I know y'all talked about it yesterday on Take It or Leave It. I want to know y'all's opinion on it. Hockey in New Orleans, yes or no, Beck?
I'm going to say... I would say yes because I think it would be cool, but at the same time, I don't think it would really work. I think, you just look at an example with Baton Rouge with the Zydeco. I think there was a lot of people were excited about the Zydeco when they first were announced, and the attendance I think was pretty good. And they're actually better. I think they're actually been playing better this year.
Yeah,
but
they're a lot better.
Not sure how the attendance has been going, but I feel like after a year or two, that kind of wears off in terms of excitement for it. And I just feel like with New Orleans, maybe it could survive, but if they're not good, then I just don't know that it would last.
Cassie, do we want hockey in the Big Easy? Yeah, you're from there. What do we think? Yes or no?
I personally know nothing about hockey, so I feel like it would not be the best idea because I feel like a lot of people in New Orleans don't know anything about hockey. But also, where are you going to put it? New Orleans is already so packed.
They'll play in the Smoothie King.
Maybe.
Most likely.
But if you have a different ownership, which it sounds like you would,
yes, that would be a
you could have a little bit of a conflict of interest between Benson and whoever the new owner is. I imagine they'd probably work something out. Look, I don't follow hockey super closely, but I watch it probably more than maybe most people here. I'd love it. I don't think the city of New Orleans could support a hockey team. I'm with Beck. Maybe a year or two, the crowds would be great. After that, I think it would dwindle down. All right, coming up, we got a full hour left of the Hunt Palmer Show here on 104.5 ESPN.
The Hunt Palmer Show.